So what happened when the other student's parent contacted the school?
The principal then called Bibi into his office, told her that her drawing, and specifically the inclusion of the line "any life," was, quote, racist and inappropriate, end quote, told her she had to apologize, told her she could no longer draw and give pictures to her friends. And remember, this is first grade we're talking about. And then when she went back to class, her teachers told her that she had to sit out of recess for 2 weeks. And all the while, no one ever explained to her what she had done wrong, other than that the drawing was racist and inappropriate, but there was no explanation as to why. And that's what I meant earlier, how even if we assume that there was a problem with this drawing, this was a teaching moment and they just failed to use that as such. So just, two levels of failure there. But then, like I said, Bibi's parents didn't find out anything about this for over a year.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential. And here's your host, Jeff Crank.
Well, thanks for joining us for another episode of American Potential. The First Amendment states, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So at what age do Americans get to claim these rights? Well, most would think you're born with those rights. But in one state, a court had determined that a first grader doesn't have the First Amendment right of freedom of speech. What did this first grader do? Well, she drew a picture for her friend based on what had been taught in the classroom. And when her friend took the picture home, her friend's mom called the school with a concern about the drawing. So what did the first grader draw? And how did this end up in court? Well, I want to welcome Caleb Trotter, who is an attorney for the Pacific Legal Foundation, and he's representing the family. Caleb, thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, first of all, I want to give you a minute to talk about Pacific Legal Foundation. You guys do incredible work. We have highlighted you several times on this show, but you do great things. Maybe talk just a minute about Pacific Legal Foundation, who you are, how folks can know more about you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So Pacific Legal Foundation, we're a public interest law firm. We're in our 51st year. We defend regular Americans and small businesses across the country in various disputes they have with the government, limiting their ability to live free lives and start businesses of their choice. We're as a nonprofit, we're entirely donor supported. We're supported just by like-minded organizations and mostly individuals who believe in our work and want to see regular people's constitutional rights fought for in courts of law. My work is in what we call equality and opportunity, and that's where really we're just defending the rights of people to be treated equally under the law and avoiding various types of discrimination, but also working for what we call economic liberty, which is defending the ability of entrepreneurs and small business people to simply start a business or enter a profession without unnecessary government regulation and restrictions.
Well, and again, it's great to have a group like yours that's out there defending these. So often our rights are defended in a court of law, and we need good organizations like Pacific Legal Foundation to be out there fighting for us. By the way, it says here that you have been to all 50 states. Is that right?
That's right. And 48 of them by car with my parents and sister, and no one killed each other.
That's amazing. Well, congratulations on that. That's pretty awesome.
Thank you.
I assume the two that you didn't get to by car was Alaska and Hawaii. Am I right in that?
That's true. Although maybe one summer I'll make the drive up to Alaska, but we did it by cruise boat, which I would definitely recommend.
Yeah. Well, and I've actually done the Alcan Highway. I've been to Alaska, I don't know, 20 or 30 or 40 times probably, but drove it one time, and it's definitely something every American should do. It's a very long trip, and make sure your car's got good maintenance before you leave. What was your favorite? Well, which one was the last one you got to visit? What was your last state?
The last one was Alaska.
Gotcha.
And that was a few years ago. I don't know if I have a favorite. I lived in Louisiana and New Orleans for a long time, and that's really my favorite place in the world. I'd say the most surprising state was North Dakota. We really had zero expectations going in, and we stayed in Bismarck and just had a really interesting, neat time there. Learning a lot about various expeditions that had gone through there and local Indian tribes. So that was just for having no expectations. It was really a nice, surprising stop.
So that North Dakota and South Dakota to some degree, but North Dakota always seems like to be the 47th one that people get to. I don't know. It's kind of tucked up there somewhere. And so it's always the one that like, well, out of the 48, that's the one I haven't, the lower 48, that's the one I haven't gotten to yet. So
it's not easy to get to. You have to be making a point to get there. So
you sure do.
That's understandable.
That's right. Well, good. Let's talk a little bit about this case. What did this little girl draw that had her friend's mom call the school about the picture?
Before I get into exactly what she drew, it would probably be a little more helpful to give just a little bit of context.
Sure.
So,
okay.
So our client, we're going to refer to her as BB because she's still a young minor.
You bet.
To maintain her privacy. So BB was a first grader in elementary school in Orange County, California. And it was getting to be February or so, which is typically Black History Month. As a part of that, her first grade teacher was reading the class a book about Martin Luther King Jr. And apparently this book introduced the class to the concept of Black Lives Matter. She was unfamiliar with this before. And the events were taking place in 2021. So this is close on the heels of the summer of 2020 with all the various demonstrations, protests, whatnot, surrounding the Black Lives Matter movement. But BB's parents have been very careful to shield her from this, mostly just because of her age and not being able to understand what's happening. So she wasn't aware of the concept of Black Lives Matter or what it meant until this book. And we also learned that the school had placed this poster in a very prominent room that all the kids saw every day. It said Black Lives Matter. It had a clenched fist. And so the school has introduced this concept to them without really teaching about it. And apparently the way this book was taught, BB was made to feel bad for a classmate of hers that is a person of color. And because of this innocent, sweet first grader feeling bad for her classmate, she did what many nice, sweet first graders do and drew her a picture. And so because of what she had just learned, the picture, it's handwritten. It says, Black Lives Matter. Matter is misspelled because she's in first grade. Below that, she wrote any life. And then below that, there are 4 little circles of various colors that are meant to represent BB, the classmate of color, and 2 of her friends holding hands. Just supposed to be a nice, inclusive drawing. Sure. She gave it to the classmate who just thanked her, and they went about their school day.
That's it. And from that, how did this turn into what it turned into? I don't get that.
Yes. So the classmate put the drawing in her backpack, took it home. And as most parents do that night, the parent was her mom was going through the backpack, found this drawing and wasn't sure why she was receiving it, was concerned. I think it's fair to say this parent was understandably concerned with why she was receiving a drawing that may have been singling her out for her race, because BB's mom at the start of the school year had asked principals, school administrators, if Black Lives Matter and various topics were going to be taught that school year. And she was told no. And so as far as the parents were concerned, this very adult topic was not going to be taught to their children. So they had no idea. And so the classmate's mom, seeing this picture, didn't know why her daughter was receiving it. And so she, I think reasonably, she emailed the principal that night or the next day, shortly thereafter, basically just asking what is this? Why is my daughter receiving this? And, basically to take it from there. And kind of one thing led to the next. And I think we'll get into that. But that was basically it. But the parents were left in the dark with what was going on in the school. And we basically just had a very innocent, sweet gesture that has now started the ball rolling with events at school.
Yeah. Now, BB didn't really understand what the phrase Black Lives Matter means, right?
No, she didn't. And just to fast forward a little, a couple years later, when the lawsuit was going and she was being deposed, she said she still didn't understand what it meant, nor did she understand of course, I think it's obvious to say that what really, raised the situation here was her inclusion of any life. Of course, the controversy around the phrase all lives matter, which obviously they're similar, but these aren't the same words. But even then, she didn't, at least at the time, I'm not sure if she does now, understand what all lives matter meant. It's certainly accurate to say she was not meaning it in any of the controversial sense that's kind of become that. She was just being literally inclusive of her friend and her classmates. Sure. And so yeah, there's no understanding of the very adult controversy surrounding these terms. Basically just reacting to what she was taught in school and just trying to be inclusive about it. Basically everything you would hope that a first grader would do when hearing something negative about a classmate.
What really strikes me about this situation, honestly, is adults don't seem to be as innocent maybe as BB was, right? It's BB's innocence that made her literally write that down, because she feels like every life is important. Every life matters. And it seems like adults sometimes twist stuff for political purposes. And maybe we should listen to kids a little bit more. I mean, isn't that kind of what's happened here?
I think that's exactly what happened here. If we boil down this dispute, obviously we're in court now. That's why I'm talking to you today, Jeff. But right. All along, so as I said, that the parents didn't know that these concepts were being taught in school. Well, this whole incident, BB's parents didn't even find out about it for a year later. And then once they did, really all they ever wanted was an apology. But when the school district and school administrators, initially they denied that anything happened. Then they said, well, we didn't do anything wrong. So at every stage of this, this story is really just a story of school failure to really, use this situation as a teaching moment, assuming that it was appropriate to include these very adult right. topics in first grade, which I personally don't think it was. But even if right. we assume it was appropriate, this was a teaching moment that they failed to do. And especially when they punished her, which I'm sure we'll get into momentarily. But then to keep it from the parents, it's just a really disconcerting situation of parents being lied to and then information being withheld from them. Basically, the school district created this entire problem from the get-go and has just made it worse, leading to where we are today in litigation.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So what happened when the other student's parent contacted the school?
So basically the principal just went and figured out what happened. The mom thought she knew who had drawn it because her daughter had told her who had given her the drawing. So when found out what the drawing was, what it meant to represent, and the exact who thought what between the principal and the classmate who received the drawing's parents, it's a little unclear. But what the district court in this case determined the facts was that the principal then called BB into his office, told her that her drawing and specifically the inclusion of the line "any life" was, quote, racist and inappropriate, end quote, told her she had to apologize, told her she could no longer draw and give pictures to her friends. And remember, this is first grade we're talking about. And then when she went back to class, her teachers told her that she had to sit out of recess for 2 weeks. And in the course of that, she basically just had to sit on a bench outside and watch her classmates play without her for 2 weeks. And all the while, no one ever explained to her what she had done wrong other than that the drawing was racist and inappropriate, but there was no explanation as to why. And that's what I meant earlier, how even if we assume that there was a problem with this drawing, this was a teaching moment and they just failed to use that as such. So just, 2 levels of failure there. But then, like I said, BB's parents didn't find out anything about this for over a year when they just accidentally heard about it from another parent who had just assumed. So if it was such a big deal, you would have hoped that the school would have told the parents about it. And so at the time that BB's mom and dad found out about this and they sought more information from the school and then eventually an apology, and that wasn't forthcoming, that eventually led to a First Amendment lawsuit.
So this is so incredible that this happened. So BB never really told her parents that any of this was even kind of going on, that she was made to sit out at recess and sort of being punished for this. And it literally took a year for another parent. Is this a third parent, right? Not right. To come to BB's parents and basically say, no, this whole thing happened over a year ago.
Yeah, when asked why she didn't tell her parents, BB said that, well, she got in so much trouble, she just assumed that the teacher or the principal was going to tell them, and
Wow.
she didn't, take it upon herself as a first grader to tell on herself because she said that she had already gotten in so much trouble at school for it, she didn't want to bring more trouble on herself. But that's right. There was something else came up a year later in school, and just another parent happened to mention it to BB's mom, and that led her to go find out what happened.
Yeah. My heart goes out to BB in this situation. I mean, here she is just innocently writing something down. She meant nothing wrong by it. And yet our society, adults, people who are supposed to know better, took this and just totally blew it out of proportion and punished her to the point that she kind of didn't want to tell her parents about it. I mean, it's really unfortunate the way the school handled this.
Yeah, that's right, Jeff. And that's why I think that, even if, and like I've said, even if there was something wrong with the drawing,
Right.
which clearly some people in the school thought there was, why wouldn't they take the opportunity to explain why and involve others? But I think this is just a good example with why teaching this to first graders wasn't appropriate, and that it was going on behind parents' backs.
Sure.
Of course, that kind of behavior on part of public school officials is going to lead to problems, and this is just a really unfortunate example of that.
Right. Now, you said that neither of the parents knew that this phrase was being used in the school, correct?
That's right. And that's why BB's classmate's mother was, so concerned and upset about this. There's deposition testimony where she's repeatedly saying that she only wanted her daughter to be taught, the school curriculum, and that's why she was upset with the drawing. She thought that, her daughter was being, exposed to other things and singled out. But the school itself had created this situation, and even she didn't know this. So yeah, the school district, and like I said at the start of the school year, BB's mom had asked specifically if Black Lives Matter was going to be taught that year, because if it was, she didn't want BB to sit through that, because she just thought she was too young and not ready to hear about that. And
Sure.
yet, lo and behold, they do it anyway, and then she reacts in a way where she's really engaging with the material in a way you would expect for a child that young, and then is punished for it, not told why. It's what do you think she took from that? Nothing
Right.
good. So
Right.
it's really, really, really sad that this is how that this happened, and this is how it was handled.
Yeah. So why did the principal still punish BB if the other parent didn't want anything to be done? I mean, that seems like a strange way of doing things.
Yeah, and I should have mentioned that. So once the principal found out what happened and told the classmates' parents, they said, okay, we understand that BB was innocent. She didn't mean anything by it. We don't want her punished. But then the principal went ahead and did it anyway. And frankly, Jeff, it's really unclear why his deposition isn't really revealing on that. There are some inconsistencies. So we don't know. I think the way we could take from that is if he himself is saying that the use of any life was racist and inappropriate, that apparently that is his own viewpoint. I don't really think there's any other explanation that we could draw from that, or any conclusion we could draw from that. But at least at this stage of the proceedings, we don't know.
I mean, this is such a troubling story on so many levels. Obviously, it's troubling from the First Amendment standpoint of it, but also just like not wanting to involve the parents. It doesn't seem that the school wanted to involve the parents here in any way, shape, or form. And it wasn't until the parents sort of forced the issue that the school kind of even responded to them.
That's right. And I'm not really an expert on the inner workings of schools. I'm a parent of a young child, a 2-year-old. So definitely, some cautionary tales to look out for. But yeah. I mean, it does make you wonder that what else could BB or even her classmates' parents have done when, BB's mom specifically asking about this and is just lied to. And then they don't find out about it through the school year. BB's mom was, regularly volunteering in school, in this school, and still didn't learn about this. So it is concerning. I'm sure you all have dug into at various episodes other aspects relating to school and perhaps school choice, and it brings home some of the concerns that a lot of school choice proponents have brought forward. And while that's beyond my expertise, but just personally as a parent and working on this case, it just brings home some concrete examples of you just definitely have to be doing the best you can to figure out what your kids are learning. And if you learn something, you've got to make a decision on when to fight back and when it's appropriate to do so.
Right. Now, did they have any policy that BB violated?
No, they could never articulate any specific policy, and oddly, they never even documented any of this situation. Even though everyone seemed to know about it. And so I'm not sure what to make of that.
Wow.
And I can't really guess, but it definitely just adds to kind of a pattern here of this school and this school district kind of doing things on the fly with a particular viewpoint, not telling parents about it. They're trying to, hide it and sweep it under the rug when it comes out. So it's basically kind of every fact you learn about this situation, just none of it says anything good about this school and the school district, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. It does seem like they were trying to do this sort of, under the table. So there wasn't a record there that a parent or someone could, complain about, which, it's so frustrating. I think it's very frustrating to parents in any school now when this kind of thing is done. And then they find out about it, when it's too late or they aren't involved in it. I mean, it's just very frustrating. Especially it's such an egregious, in my view, such an egregious First Amendment violation. This is a public school, I assume. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So, did the school, they never explained to BB really what she did wrong either, right?
No, the only explanation she ever given was that she was being racist and inappropriate, but never never why she couldn't give this to there was no explanation. She was just left with this very cruel words, no one to explain to her. She wasn't able to talk to her family about it. So as soon as BB's mom found out about this, she was very clear to explain to BB that she did nothing wrong, that she was just being kind and inclusive to her classmate. And so at that point, she was able to at least, learn more about, or at least hear more about the situation. But unfortunately, the school just never offered any other explanation or anything to her about it.
Yeah. Now, BB's mom, she tried to get this resolved at the school level, right? But what happened?
Yeah, so initially she just wanted to find out what happened. And when she did, there were there were a couple of stages of just kind of internal complaints about how it was handled at the school, because she was, of course, upset that her children were learning about Black Lives Matter without her knowledge and against her wishes, and basically that she was lied to. And then when she found out about the punishment, she was obviously quite upset about that. And so really all along, she was just seeking an acknowledgement of the problem and an apology. And I mean, she was essentially lied to, then gaslit, then basically just, so, well, everything was fine. There's nothing to see here. But it escalated throughout the year, and this notion that BB was being racist through this drawing, it's this kind of gossip spread, and the family eventually wound up relocating to Florida because things got so bad in the community around this. And at all stages, the school district either were saying nothing happened, nothing was wrong here. I think essentially the principal through this process was just investigating himself, which is an obvious problem. I think we've learned that through this, and once the lawsuit was filed, the school district finally changed that procedure. And so if there is a complaint about a principal, that's at least now handled by someone within the school district themselves, not just the school principal. So there's a positive development there. But yeah, and so once there was nothing forthcoming by way of an apology, or at least even an acknowledgement that something was wrong here, given the punishment here and the stakes involved from a First Amendment standpoint, the family felt that they had no choice but to file a lawsuit to help clear the family's name, but also just provide some accountability for the school district, since they seemed wholly uninterested in doing it internally.
Yeah, well, they're heroes for doing that, because we do need parents who are willing to do things like that, or we're never going to hold reckless bureaucrats accountable, quite frankly. So this case went to court. There was a ruling, I think, in favor of the school. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so there are a number of claims that I'm not going to address today because we've come in on the appeal. But basically what happened was the two kind of relevant claims for our purposes today were that this punishment was just a straightforward violation of BB's First Amendment rights. But then also very similar to that, the punishment itself was then in retaliation and violation of the First Amendment. So these are very similar legal claims, but they have separate analyses, and there are reasons for bringing them separately. And so the case went through discovery. There were depositions of everybody involved. And then the school district late last year filed what's called a motion for summary judgment. And basically what that is that's saying that the facts aren't really in dispute. Everyone can basically agree on all the key important facts. So a trial is not necessary. And so they just file legal briefs, and then a judge decides the case at that point. And so that's what happened. And the judge in federal district court in Orange County said that there was no First Amendment violation here. And so he entered summary judgment in favor of the school district. And so that basically would end the case if there wasn't an appeal. We then got involved and have appealed the case to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and we're in the middle of that at the moment. Some kind of troubling things that came out of the district court's ruling were, well, and to step back, so the seminal U.S. Supreme Court case on student speech in school that says that, yes, students do have First Amendment rights, it's not just a totalitarian environment, is the famous case of Tinker v. Des Moines. And this comes from the Vietnam War era, where a number of high school and junior high school students wanted to wear black armbands to school silently to protest the Vietnam War. And when they did so, they were sent home and suspended until they came to school without the armbands. And so that case wound its way through the courts, eventually getting to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said that sending the students home for a silent, passive protest in which there was no evidence that there was any disruption to the school environment, that was a violation of the students' First Amendment rights. And so from that case, the early 1970s or late 60s. I forget the year, but right around there. More or less all of the school speech cases have stemmed from that. And we've got various buckets depending on what kind of speech. So like a vulgar commencement speech, for instance, is going to be handled a bit differently than something like this. And so within that context, what was really troubling about the district court's decision here was he basically ignored that case as well as a much older case involving elementary school students and severely diminished the level of First Amendment rights that children have. And no one's saying that the school environment for young kids is exactly the same as a street protest in public with adults. Like, no one is saying these are the same things, that the rights are coextensive. But the judge in this case so watered down the free speech rights of elementary school students that as a matter of precedent, I think it's fair to say that school districts in the future can look to this case if the appeal's not successful and say, well, if it's early elementary school, we can basically do whatever we want to limit a student's speech rights. And that's not accurate as a matter of law. There are numerous Supreme Court cases as well as appellate cases from around the country that say otherwise, but that's what this district court judge held contrary to that. And so it's very important from a precedential free speech standpoint that this case succeeds on appeal on that reason alone. And then one last thing, and I'll turn it back to you, Jeff, that was really troubling about this case was we were talking earlier about this adult controversy surrounding the all lives matter phrase. Well, there's no evidence in this case that, as I mentioned, that BB understood any of that, was aware of any of it. I mean, in fact, she wasn't at all, and that she just used it literally to be inclusive of all of her classmates. Well, in spite of all that, the judge took it upon himself to cite in his decision a New York Times article discussing the controversy around All Lives Matter, and he said something to the effect of, well, just kind of everyone knows that this is used derogatorily in the context of referring to Black Lives Matter. Well, the two problems with that is, one, you can't just bring in outside information and evidence into a case like that. You have to use the evidence that has been properly introduced through the various court rules. I mean, this is something you learn in your second year of law school. But then to just kind of conflate this controversy with what happened in this case is just completely inconsistent with all of the evidence on both sides. And so that's just deeply troubling. I think it clearly just shows that this judge had made up his mind about this case and was bringing in evidence to support it, even though it wasn't present in this case. So what was bad at the school district, it only made worse in court.
Yeah, I think it's stunning, actually. I mean, you have to be nice because, you are a practicing attorney. I'm not. I'm stunned that a federal judge could look at the facts as you laid them out and come to any conclusion other than the fact that this is a violation of the First Amendment. It's a public school. It's government basically telling a first grader that, you're going to be in trouble. You can't say this in school. And I would even argue, I know that she meant nothing by this other than the innocence of a first grader. But even if she had meant something by this, she'd still have a First Amendment right to do it. Would she not?
That's right. Exactly. And the cases, no matter where we are, what federal district or what federal court of appeal, what circuit court of appeals we're in, have all uniformly said that even if there's some kind of disruption or so under Tinker, there's basically two things that would allow a school district to limit or punish speech. And one is if something has led to great disruption, or the word is substantial disruption, or the school very reasonably expects there to be such disruption. Well, everyone has admitted that aspect of Tinker was not present in this case at all. Mm-hmm. I think it's also obvious that it wasn't. So what we're left is a school could also limit speech rights if the rights of another student just to be let alone to go about their day in school were were interfered with. And so that's basically what the school and the court would have to hang their hat on. But as we've talked about, and one other extremely important fact is when BB went to apologize to the classmate had no idea why she was apologizing, didn't understand why she was apologizing.
Sure.
Because she didn't take the drawing to be in any way offensive or controversial. She just thought it was a nice drawing. So all the evidence shows that her rights to be let alone were not interfered with whatsoever. It was really just the principal. And it wasn't even the classmates' parents once they learned what had actually happened. And so because of that, even if there were a situation where there was substantial disruption or some other student was being interfered with, the court said just a plain fact of that alone still isn't enough to limit student speech rights. There has to be something beyond just mere offense. And that's because we're in public school, we have a pluralistic society, and people are just going to say things and do things that from time to time in public, that's just part of being in a free society. So it has to raise a level above the level of just basic offense. And I think it's fair to say that we didn't even have that in this case, but that's what the judge brought in with this New York Times article to basically say just this very controversy is so offensive that justifies limiting speech rights. And I think that's just clearly wrong for so many reasons. And if I were in your shoes, Jeff, I would definitely agree that as well. I will just say yes, it is outrageous, and that's why we very happily appealed this case to get it corrected.
Yeah, I just can't. I'm sort of stunned that a federal judge who went to law school, and learned about the First Amendment in law school. If this isn't a violation of the First Amendment, I mean, I just don't know what would be. I just can't figure out, if you're looking at the facts in this, why a federal judge wouldn't come to that conclusion. But I guess that's why we have an appeals process in our system, and I believe that this case will be overturned on that, and I'm sure you do as well.
And that's why Pacific Legal Foundation got involved. We saw this decision, saw not only just how wrong it was from the facts, but that even though this is one judge, one district court in California, these things can get a toehold as far as precedent goes. And so seeing the big picture here, and at BB's family, they care very much about that as well. They're not just in this to right the wrong that BB had to deal with, but they understand the big picture, the risk to other students around the country. They know that they needed to stand up for other kids in that school district as well. So it's very important to them that other families and other children don't go through this as well. And so that's why we got involved to help them with the appeal.
Yeah. Well, listen, Caleb, I mean, you guys are heroes for doing this. You're First Amendment heroes. I had Joe Kennedy on this show, of course, a great First Amendment hero, the coach who prayed with his students and then, got fired and then took it to court, and U.S. Supreme Court reversed that firing. The people who do this truly are heroes, and these parents are heroes for not just, so many parents just walk away when they see a situation like this and say, well, look, I don't want the trouble. It's a hassle. I'm sure this has been very disruptive in their lives and even probably in BB's life to some degree. But you can't walk away from these kinds of things if America is going to survive as a country that respects the First Amendment and free speech. So, please pass that along to your clients and to everybody at Pacific Legal Foundation. It's very important that you're working on this.
Yeah, BB's mom, her name's Chelsea. She's one of my heroes. She has been fighting for her daughter and her family for this for almost 2 years now. And and that's clients like that are why public interest attorneys like myself do what we do. Right. We couldn't do the work that we do and we believe in from a matter of principle without clients willing to step up and put their name on cases. Because it's not Pacific Legal Foundation versus whomever. It's the person or the business going through the problem with the government, and they're the ones that have to deal with, public opinion and potential blowback. And so when you see public interest lawsuits brought by people, it's a big deal for people to put their name and their neck out to take on the government. I mean, who wants to sue the government? I mean, some
Nobody.
people really like doing it, obviously, but most
right.
people, they just want to go about their lives, live happy, productive lives, spend time with their family. They don't want to spend years tied up with government attorneys and the public attention brought to it. And so I do think it's important, as you say, to view people like this as heroes, because they're not just doing it for themselves. Oftentimes, in cases we bring, all we're asking is for a court to declare something unconstitutional and prevent the government from doing it. There's not even any money changing hands if you were to win. So it's all about doing the right thing and making sure bad things don't happen to people again in the future. And it takes special people who are willing to step up to do that, because it's totally understandable that most people would not want to put themselves in that situation. And so it does take, people who have that willingness to stand up. And will always be grateful of Chelsea and all of our clients who are willing to do that.
Yeah. Well, Chelsea's a hero. BB's a hero. Sweet BB, I can't believe that all of this has happened. I mean, there's got to be a lesson in there, I'm sure. Well, one lesson is that her mom's going to fight for her. That's for sure. And there's a First Amendment free speech lesson in there too, that maybe someday BB herself will look at and say, wow, that's pretty cool. I was a part of that. So there's lots of good that's going to come of this after you win this case, which I would I'd bet my career that you're going to win.
Well, we certainly hope you're right.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Caleb. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for telling the story, and appreciate all the great work that you all do.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeff. Happy to do so.
You bet. Well, this is another example, just like Joe Kennedy and his case, right? Where someone has to stand up to an out of control government, an out of control school district somewhere that just violates the First Amendment rights of their students, of their employees, whoever it may be. And we have to have people who are willing to pay the price. Chelsea here, the mother, willing to pay the price. And thankfully, we have attorneys who are good people. Not all attorneys are good people. I don't mean to say that any attorney is good people, because, they're attorneys. But these attorneys at Pacific Legal Foundation, they do such great work. And there's lots of attorneys who do that kind of work, where they are out there really defending our rights. They're not just defending BB's rights in this. They're defending the rights of every single American. And that's important. So I thank Caleb for coming on, telling the story, but also for all the great people involved in this. Look, thanks for being with us on another episode of American Potential. We want to keep working to keep you inspired with great stories. Best way to stay connected is by liking and subscribing to our channel, as well as follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on YouTube. And if you have a great story, like BB's story, about someone working to expand freedom or opportunity, you can go to AmericanPotential.com and you can fill out our Share Your Story section there, and we'll get in touch with you and see if we can tell your story as well. Thanks for being with us for another episode of American Potential.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.